Hey everyone, it's Amy here, presenter and producer of the Eerie Excursion podcast, the podcast that tells tales, eerie tales from around the UK, as told by local tour guides and experts. Now, as a final reminder, season 2 is coming out on the 17th of September, so make sure you don't miss that. But in the meantime, I've been doing some deep dives into episodes from season 1, getting sort of my highlights and favorite stories from them. So this is the last of season 1 that I will be doing. It's easily the most popular and probably one of the most famous cities in the UK for ghosts, and this episode takes place in York. So for those of you who are unsure where York sits in the UK, here it is. Like I said, it's probably one of the most oldest cities outside of London, but don't quote me on that. It's most famous, I would say, for being a Viking settlement and celebrates its Viking heritage quite a lot with the Jorvik Centre. For anybody who's watched shows like The Last Kingdom or any sort of Viking shows that are set in the UK, York is often mentioned as Jorvik because that was the Viking word for it. So my guide in York was Mark, and he works for York's oldest ghost tour. They've been going for over 50 years now, and they have so many stories to tell, hence why the episode is called Ghosts Galore. Links to their website are below, so you can check them out as well. Now, obviously, as I've been doing in the other recap videos, I only sort of take 2 stories. Like I said, this episode is really just jam-packed of so many stories. But I really wanted to mention 2 of my favorite ones. So the first one, I mentioned it in the season 1 recap video I did a couple of weeks ago. But it's honestly such a great story I wanted to share again. But instead of me telling the story, I thought I would get clips from the episode from Mark telling the story. Now, it takes place at the Blue Boar Inn. Unfortunately, I didn't have any visuals to go with the audio, but the storytelling is absolutely fantastic and the story itself is great.
So here we are in the cellar of the Blue Boar Inn on Castlegate, and surrounding us is the description of the most famous, notorious highwayman, Dick Turpin. He was hanged in York in 1739, but quite remarkably, he spent one night in this pub, in this cellar, when he was already dead. How did he manage that? Well, he gave the hangman some money, got him to promise that he'd hang him quickly, he wouldn't feel any pain, and he'd bury him in St. George's churchyard. The hangman was a criminal himself and a drunk, and he was loving it. Thousands and thousands of people are coming to watch Turpin die. This is his moment to make fun of Turpin for drinks and coins. And there was Turpin for all he'd done in his life, and he'd done a lot. Here he was being humiliated, made fun of by a drunken hangman. So with a rope round his neck, he couldn't stand any longer. He jumped off and hanged himself. The hangman took his dead body into this cellar and charged people money to see him. His friends found out where he was, broke in through a trapdoor, wrapped his body in a carpet and buried him in St. George's churchyard in York, where he's buried to this day. People can go and pay their respects if they wish. It's a happy place, is this pub. It's a place of reflection. And I think in the cellar, I always say, whatever you do, don't make fun of Dick Turpin. Because if you do, something dreadful might happen.
So, the Blue Boar Inn houses the most famous ghost in York, but when you type things like UK's most haunted pubs or haunted pubs in York, the one that continuously comes up is the Golden Fleece. So there are quite a lot of ghosts there. There's a plaque outside of the pub that tells you things like there's a Canadian pilot, there's a ghost called One-Eyed Jack, there's also a couple of Victorian kids who like to play pranks, and so that's a great place. We also covered that in the Golden Fleece, and Mark has a very personal story to tell in that, which is really nice. But speaking of boys, The last story I want to share from you is from York's Riverside. So this one does have visuals, so you can have a look to see what we're talking about. It's not quite a ghost story, but it is more of an eerie tale, as Mark explains.
One or two buildings around down here claim the same ghost story of a boy. He looks shocked to see you, and you're shocked to see him. He turns and he vanishes, and he always makes his way to the river, and he sort of melts away.
So like I said, these videos really are just a highlight of the episode, and I cannot stress how jam-packed this episode is with stories. So definitely check it out to hear some more. And as I've said before, remember season 2 is coming out on the 17th of September, so make sure you don't miss any stories by subscribing.